Good evening. Welcome to the Monday, November 7th, 2016 Washougal City Council Workshop Meeting. Rose, could you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Boger, Councilmember Wagner.
Here.
Councilmember Greenlee,
Here.
Councilmember McDaniel,
Here.
Councilmember Shoemaker,
Here.
Councilmember Lindsay,
Here.
Councilmember Corsi.
Here. Thank you. Councilmember Boger did let us know that he would, if he makes this meeting, it'll be at the very end, so. Are there any members of the public that would like to address council before we get started this evening? Okay, likely not your only opportunity. Moving to new business, finance, utility revenue, bond financing. Jennifer and Jim, come on up.
Take a chair.
Good evening, Jim.
Thank you all.
Thanks for making the trip down.
Yeah, well, I was mentioning to David, traffic was kind to me, so I made good time coming down. So I'm here this evening to talk to you about the opportunity to refinance the 2011 water and sewer revenue bonds for interest cost savings. Currently, we're estimating that you can save approximately $60,000 a year. If we turn to page 1, you can also see the third bullet point that your current bond rating grade is A+. So every time you issue bonds with a public bond sale, you have to do a rating presentation. So I'll be working with Jen and David on that rating presentation, as well as other staff members for that call, and we'll see how Standard & Poor's views the city, if they award the city an upgrade or reaffirm it at A+. But either way, A+ is a very good rating. Page 2 shows the interest rate market. I always like to say that for some reason rates always seem to tick up when I come to a city council meeting, but I think it's more related to what's going on with the election, and there's a lot of hype in the market right now. But you know, rest assured though, even though to the far right rates ticked up, for you it's about half that impact, because these bonds would be bank qualified, which means that you issue $10 million or less a year, and that lowers your rate by about 0.30%, so just over 1/4%. So it's not as drastic as it looks, and we'll just have to see how the market, how they react after tomorrow's election results. So it's sometimes we see that there's actually an overreaction and rates trend down. This refinancing is subject to market conditions. So if rates all of a sudden spiked way up, we'd probably be the first to recommend that you postpone the bond sale. And at that point, everything stops. There's no costs to the city, and we just wait for the market to come back. Page 3 shows the estimated savings, and again, you know, highlighted in yellow to the far right, you can see the first year savings would be about $47,000. Thereafter, it's $60,000 to $62,000. There's 15 years remaining. Your average annual savings is about $60,632. The estimated net borrowing cost is just over, it's about 2.5% to refinance outstanding rates that are 4.5% to 5%. We have an industry calculation known as the net present value savings percent. So ideally you want to achieve 5% or greater when you're refinancing bonds in advance of the call date. And currently we're estimating that your net present value savings percent is 9.24%. So by industry standards, it's considered a very good candidate to refinance. I guess any questions on the numbers? Page 4 shows your current rating grade at A+. The higher the rating grade, then the lower the interest cost, because investors perceive less risk with a higher rating grade. The bottom left-hand corner shows key factors, and one of them is the management factor. And you know, one thing you can consider is possibly updating your financial management policy, where you put in some goals as far as a minimum cash reserve, achieving a certain minimum net present value savings percent. So we've been finding that an updated financial management policy can help to achieve a higher rating grade. And page 5 shows the schedule going forward. Step 3, November 21st, the city council would approve the revenue bond ordinance. November 28th, there would be a conference call with the Standard & Poor's rating analysts. You would know your rating grade just prior to December 8th, and then the bonds would be priced on December 15th, and you would close the issue on December 29th. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Council?
Does this extend like the payout date on this?
It does not.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a great question. And the one thing on this bond issue is the bonds are not callable until March 1st, 2021. So when you saw that schedule on the savings and the principal payments, it's because there'd be an overlap now with a non-refinance portion plus this refinancing. So the net effect, if you were, basically you'll have two schedules to account for that merge together. If you compare that to the outstanding bonds before the refinancing, then that'll lower your payment by about $60,000 a year.
Steve?
They're callable in 5 years.
The new issue would be callable probably, I think, September of 2026. So it's standard practice to make the first 10 years non-callable. That's pretty much what the bond market expects and most investors expect. If there's an extenuating circumstance and you wanted a shorter call date, then we can certainly work with you on that. However, it does raise the interest rate slightly.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out why rates would be declining in the next 10 years, and I can't think of a single reason.
Yeah, it's a great point. Yeah.
Jim, are there any things that we can be doing? I know you mentioned updating the management practices and policies. Are there any other things we can do to try and position ourselves to get a better rating from Standard & Poor's? I know we've been at A+ for quite a while.
Yeah.
And we've got some of the policies in place, reserves in place. You know, obviously, we've got a good track record as far as number of years with key managers being in all the positions that they're in and stability on staff. Plus, you know, all of our clean audits that we've had the last 6 years running. Is there any way to package that stuff up to maybe?
Yeah, and we'll do that. We'll put together about a 30-page rating presentation. Sean, you bring up all the great high points when you look at experience of the council, experience of staff. I'll go through and look at your financial management policies again and may have some suggestions. I like to say that the rating agency now is really getting in deep into the details. They like to see more transparency. They like to see things that are formalized. So they want to see what, for a water sewer system, they want to see a minimum cash reserve as a percent of your annual operating expenses. They want to hear that if you're going to refinance bonds, you'll achieve a net present value savings percent of, say, 4% or greater. They want to hear that, this is a new one, that you're reviewing your investments on a monthly basis, that you're reviewing policies and procedures on a regular basis, and that you've adopted a recent rate study. When was the last rate study for the city?
It goes through 18.
Oh, okay.
So we'll be starting that process again.
Okay.
It was updated in 13.
Okay, then that's still fairly recent.
Parts of it updated last year.
Okay.
Sewer.
Yeah, sewer was, but we looked at this has been a conversation we've had a couple of times. In fact, for the last 2 rating calls that we've had, and Jim's provided us with model financial management policies that would be updates from our current financial management policies. And unfortunately, the one key item, which is the cash balance percentage,
Right.
is a little bit higher than what we currently have and what's currently been built into our rate model. So we simply can't achieve it without a rate increase.
Yep.
Or dramatically slowing down our facilities plan, which is not tenable
Right.
because of our mandates. So it's something that we can consider. Now, maybe you can work it, and maybe we could pull it off. We're gonna try later
Yeah.
this month, you can bet. We put the team together and we talk about this community and how great it is and all of the things that you've mentioned. And then they interrupt us and they ask us these questions and we give them the answers, and you get this feeling that they're sitting there like this while they're watching. It is what it is.
How far off are we on that value?
Well, it's a combination of factors. Your economy is certainly growing and improving since last year, so that's a credit positive. This is a refinancing for cost savings. Potentially, you may do a small new money issue. I think we had talked about, earlier that if you were to fund, say, $1 million in new money improvements for 20 years, that would have an annual payment of approximately $70,000 per year. So then the net effect of taking on a new money bond really is only $10,000 a year if you're saving $60,000. So I think that would be revenue neutral. But yeah, thanks for the reminder, David. I work with so many cities that sometimes I'm going, okay, let's see, what
I'm
did I?
just thinking about that cash reserve and what amount we may need to, what the percentage is that we need to get that up, obviously.
Jen looked at that in the last couple of weeks. I don't know if you remember that.
I don't remember. We were off, when you combined everything together and added
Right.
them all together with our current reserves on hand, and we were off just a smidge. That's why I was wondering if they were more goals or if, we had to be able to meet them in order for them to be in place. So that was
Yeah.
kind of why we paused for a moment to look
And
at
what
that.
that smidge off is though, does that include our unencumbered general fund reserves?
No,
So depending on
system.
what the savings could be,
Yeah, we can't include the general fund reserves. It's just the water and sewer system.
you could if we moved it from general fund unencumbered reserves to water sewer system cash reserves though, could we not?
You could, but then I think you'd have to see what the impact would be on the general fund. And, yeah,
What
Or-
What would an A plus, what's the next, double A
minus.
minus?
right.
What would that do in a rate?
Yeah, so,
Is
and
that
that's the bottom line.
What's
So,
the basis, that savings?
if you go from an A plus to a double A minus, then that's gonna lower your rate about 0.05%. That's the hard question that, I was hoping you wouldn't answer. So if we turn to page 3, if you were at, currently we're estimating 2.53%. If you went up one grade to double A minus, assuming today's market, then you'd be about 2.48%. So not a huge difference, but it's, 5 basis points or 0.05%. But from a public relations standpoint and all those things, it's a great accomplishment if you can do it. But then the way the market is right now, it's such a small change.
Yeah.
So you're in a great position. Sometimes too, it's just the way the rating agencies see it, and so, we don't know, so to speak, what goes on behind closed doors for when they do what they call, it goes before the committee, and then the members of the rating committee vote on it. And so sometimes they'll come, they'll just call me up and they'll say, okay, the city's been reaffirmed at A+, but internally, they may see it as a very strong A+, and then all of a sudden, the next time you're upgraded, and we ask, well, what really changed from last year to this year? And they say it, then they'll finally admit, oh, well, we saw the city as a strong A+.
Before.
Yeah, but those are things we can't find out until afterwards.
Paul?
My memory is that one of the contributing factors is the size of the organization. Huge organizations can get AAA. Organizations our size, or A+ is about as high as you're going to see. I think Battleground is A+. I think Camas is A+. Vancouver might be double A minus, but they're more than 10 times our size.
Yeah, Vancouver's in the double A range. It just depends. Water sewer revenue bonds are a little bit different than general obligation bonds.
Okay.
City of Battleground is in the double A range. And so So you're right, but then in 2006, they changed the criteria, and Standard & Poor's said, well, bigger is not necessarily better. And then we started seeing cities like, I remember working on the city of Edgewood in 2007, and they achieved the same rating grade as the city of Tacoma and Pierce County at that time of AA minus.
Oh,
You
okay.
know, and so it was just, the
Okay.
timing was right for them. So it just depends. But yeah, it gives you a goal to work with, but it just depends on your area. There's a number of factors. They look at, for a water sewer system, they look at your top 10 ratepayers, your utility rates, how you manage the system, the cash. Then they look at management, experience of staff, financial management policies, what your long-term outlook is as far as capital improvements. So for one city, they might be rated AA but have no outstanding revenue bonds. You know, your city has revenue bonds, and so it's just, sometimes it's just a matter of timing in your growth curve.
We know you'll do the best you can.
Oh, we will. Yeah. And I think, you know, the nice thing about it is you're timing it near a historic low in rates, and it just gives you more flexibility in the future to capture these rates, save money for the ratepayers, and then a few years from now, you kind of reevaluate everything and say, okay, do we want to go back into the market, or do we want to spend cash?
Any other questions for Jim or Jennifer? Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks for taking the time to come down.
Oh, yeah, my pleasure. Yeah, see ya.
Real estate excise tax code updates.
Okay, I don't have a PowerPoint for this one because it's super simple. I had a handout in the packet, and essentially what the change is for is the existing code that's lined out is back when we were less than 5,000 population, and the code is different for REIT when you're over 5,000 population. So we are just changing it to be in compliance with the population level that we're at. So there will be an ordinance next week to make that change. Or weekly this month.
Being in compliance is good.
Yes. That's all I have.
Thank you, Jim.
Yep.
Community development. Marlin Develop, just so council knows, we'll be pulling the Spyglass Hill Development Agreement until, most likely the first part of the year.
Yes.
So, Marlin Development Agreement.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. As mentioned, we have a development agreement that's in front of you this evening. It's in our newly annexed area, and as you recall, we have a moratorium in that area, and so that requires developments that are consistent with our urban growth area land use study to move forward, but they have to have a development agreement that would come in front of you. So this evening, cover a little bit about where is the property. Mentioned that briefly. What's being proposed, and again, is it consistent with the UGA land use study?
Jamie, do you want to come up to the table as well, or?
He was trying to get out of saying anything.
Yeah.
Probably his clients would probably have preferred that too.
For council members who haven't met him, Jamie Housley is the attorney for the developer.
So, looking at our fine city, we're up in the northwest corner of the city in our newly annexed area. Looking at the site, there's two existing parcels, approximately 14.2 acres, and this is what they're looking at proposing. 38 lots. It's about 3 units, just a little north of 3 units per acre. You can see open space. They have an internal loop road, improvements along 30th Circle, Crown, and McKeever. All single-family detached, and you're just north of 13,000 square foot is the largest, down to 8,000 square feet. Current zoning there is R110, so 10,000 square feet. They have proposed it as a PUD, which would allow them to have the 8,000 square feet. In looking at our preferred alternative plan, this was in the transitional density area, so this was to be either R175 or R110. And looking forward, our draft zoning maps actually have it at R110 as right now. That will be coming forward to you for adoption in January. The alignment, I will note, the alignment on this road, you'll notice in their plan, it's further to the west, and that is actually consistent with our draft transportation plan, so they have aligned with that as well. I'll note that this, I did put this in front of the Community Development Committee on a couple occasions, and most recently just late last month, and that was, I think, a pretty good meeting. And so with that, and in your packet is the development agreement itself, and actually Section 3 does a very good job, I think, of detailing the compliance with the UGA land use study criteria as well. And so the recommended action for this evening is to set a public hearing for December 5th, so it's out a little bit. We're still kind of work on SEPA and get that stuff moving through, but December 5th will be the hearing date, and that will be on consent this evening.
Mitch, can you go back to this slide real quick? I can't tell what it is. What's the little tiny dashed line that's just underneath the northernmost blue line?
That is actually what's called Fur Court, or I believe 30th? Northeast 30th Circle. That's actually how the road kind of meanders through there, like the center line of that road.
Is that one small road that comes off of there?
Yes.
And how does that line up with this? Or does it?
It does. The northern boundary of their property is within that 30th circle.
Is 30th circle?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Questions, Paul?
Michelle,
Yeah, I had just forgotten to ask this on our meeting. The frontage of Crown Road, is there a sidewalk there?
Yes.
There is?
Yeah.
Okay,
There's a 5-foot planter strip, 5-foot sidewalk.
okay.
Let's see, right there. SW sidewalk.
Well, that's great to hear, because I was just looking at this UGA thing where it shows the trail being in the opposite side of the road, but I think that our best hope for getting access to that middle school, that all these new developments, the kids in those areas will be accessing, will be to have it on the right side where because I don't know what Camus has planned for that side of the road, or if that's even developable stuff, so that's great to
Still in
hear.
the county, yeah.
Yeah, and then the other question I had was the, you drive through so many of these areas, and this is for the property, the Dubouvre property as well. What are we looking for fencing or walls? Because I just think about going through Vancouver, and it's just an unsightly mess, these deteriorating, wood post fences and stuff. And so I'm wondering what's gonna be here. Do we have anything in our specifications for the UGA of what we're looking for like these miles of lined fences and stuff like that?
Currently, no, and I don't believe that the study itself, I don't think we got to the detail of talking fencing. Fencing is typically just property owner doing something, on their own. Sometimes developments themselves, like this development, I'm sure will have a consistent theme throughout for their own fencing, but that's pretty much just developer driven.
Because I thought of it specifically when we were talking about not having a sidewalk in that Dubouvre area. I know this is a different piece of property, and just having this long kind of Patton Parkway thing,
Right.
that we would want to certainly consider what kind of.
And Jamie's, the representative for
Yeah.
that one as well, but I think that one of the things that we talked about on that one was having a cross-section of that road and what it would look like, and I think that that's where we would probably try to get at that level of detail about what we would want along the fencing, along that arterial that we were talking about, that east-west arterial.
Okay, and so I'm just wondering if it's something that we should think about for this area as well, going Crown Road. What's the plan for that?
I don't know if you guys have an idea of. Not yet, but I think we'll take it under advisement and get back to Mitch within
Okay.
a few days.
And then.
So Michelle, are you thinking about that for all lots that back onto
No.
roadways, or just
I
Crown
think
Road.
she's just thinking
And
about.
Crown Road and those major thoroughfares,
Yeah.
um,
So it'd be lots 8 through
Five.
1 here, and then 9 through 12.
12.
I don't know, it just seems to really, after 15, 20 years, impact the look of an area and really can decay.
Oftentimes what we're seeing in the private sector nowadays is, I run down 15th all the time from my office, and I look at those rotting fences that have snails on them. And oftentimes we're finding that developers that want to have high quality development, there's more enforcement mechanisms in HOAs to kind of give them more teeth to ensure that those things have longevity. So, I mean, certainly we could address that in the development application with the HOA requirements, but I can also talk to my client offline and get back to Mitch on that.
Okay. And then the second question was, when you said that it had met most of the UGA, and like you said, we were very happy with this new plan. But when it talks about, park trail connectivity, and I was just wondering, is that, the sidewalk, is that considered how it's meeting that aspect of the UGA then?
That is how, in this particular development where we basically, it is frontage roads that would have that pedestrian connection. There is not necessarily an opportunity to, plus they have good circulation throughout. There's not a need to try to get some pedestrian trail somewhere because we don't have a street system in place.
And so there was no other specific, park or pocket park area within
Not that we were looking at.
development? Because I know I had talked to you offline about that, and
The one thing about this, what they are looking at, I mean, that loop road, that internal loop road is their intention is to gate that. And so that will be, you won't have a lot of those, people in the street and then those kind of issues playing out, internal to this development, because it will be, at least as proposed now, would be a gated community.
And so this is, how should we as a council, or how do you recommend to us to address the need or the desire for requiring that in some of these other developments
Yeah, I
that
think
we're
that-
looking at?
I think that, one, that, especially when you look at this plan, I think they originally were designed at about 44 lots, if I'm not mistaken, and they cut it back to try to address our density issues, try to address our size concerns. And really, given that they're really doing 4 roads surrounding their property, there wasn't really an opportunity to set aside more land that they needed. They have a lot of land for stormwater. They have to, address stormwater. They are actually looking at doing some low-impact development voluntarily, low-impact development stormwater. And then they have some steep slopes, stuff that they really couldn't do much with. And when you start looking at other properties, like when we talked about the DeBoover property, a much larger piece of property where we've actually identified on those putting those stars of the parks plan, those are where we're going to try to get those opportunities. Well, the important part for I'll say smaller, I mean 14 acres, but the smaller development is making sure that connectivity gets to those parks. To me, that's what we really need to focus on with this one.
So this property, you don't find that to be a,
I don't necessarily think that, given its proximity to the trail system that's in the Camas County, and then with the other development that's coming online with DeBoover, I think having that connectivity will address the recreational needs there.
so that's something we need to really address with that particular piece of property then, is the need for a park.
I think Jamie, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but they're very well aware of that one.
Okay.
Is the,
That north-south connector that doesn't align with the present draft, how much of a wrench in the works is that?
It's not, because this alignment that they have done is in alignment with the transportation draft.
It
is, yeah.
Okay.
This preferred alternative that we adopted before we had boots on the ground figuring out the best place for the road.
Right.
We had it further to the east.
But
Turns out that's the better location for it.
But we've changed that, which
Yeah.
is the color one is an old draft, it's not the most.
Right. We We haven't adopted a
Okay.
transportation plan yet, but the draft transportation plan shows it right here.
And then the other question, you said something that kind of, a gated community, my memory from being on planning commission is that we require that a gated community have one entrance and that same exit, that you can't have a pass-through.
Our code makes provisions for gated community. I don't believe that we have that criteria. I can look into that.
I would suggest you look into that, because I remember that very clearly.
And that would be one of the issues with the development agreement. This is something that is specific, that the developer is asking in order to, in moving this forward, is that it's a modification to the standards to have this internal road without the sidewalks, because it is only going to be for residential folks in there. And then, again, we'd still have to be looking at our code that we have, but I don't recall, I could be wrong, Paul, but I will check on that.
I remember that we discussed that at length when we were talking about gated communities when I was in planning commission. And that, of course, was a long time ago. But that was one of the things that people, that the planning commission seemed pretty firm on, is that you wanted one entrance to a gated community.
Well, and it is one of those things through a development agreement that we can look at modification to.
Okay.
So I think that's, if it is there, this is something that we want to try to address.
That's what I was gonna say. I was just gonna say 3670B170, which is the statute that governs development agreements, allows us to, you as a council also to deviate on issues like that. And because especially this is a PUD and not a straight subdivision, that also lends itself to some modifications of development standards. And I would argue that would be one of them that would be susceptible.
Why would you rather have just one entrance exit? I think public safety-wise, we would prefer two ways in and out of there. Just
Fire department likes multiple points of access, I know that, so I don't know if it was, I'm not sure what it would have been. But we'll look.
Yeah,
Mike
most
and
definitely.
the two Mikes, Mike and Jim would remember. I don't remember. And it was actually before Dave was on planning, so.
I don't remember either.
Well, it was before you were on planning commission.
Other questions?
I was just gonna ask along this, there is a wetland open space / steep slope track, which is not a stormwater open space track, so it's not a stormwater facility. Is that usable in any way, or is it so steep, it's just gonna be visual?
It would be visual, it's steep in there, and again, I don't think under your current codes you could develop that.
So it's not a place to put in a
Yeah, I mean,
little walking path, a
Neighborhood
bench
zip
or
lines?
something. Someone can go sit
Rock
in,
climbing.
I
go
think
sit
that-
in there or something.
we try to, I mean, if there is ever an opportunity for us to try to do trails, I think this was just one that I don't think lended itself to that. One, it also, it's hard to see, but if you get down, right there's this Ederson Road that will come in, so when this site develops, that road will be extended. I can't get my finger down all the way in the corner there, but you can see it down there. That road will come up there, so again, you're gonna have, that may actually end up cul-de-sacing, there may be an opportunity for doing something different, but at this point, it just didn't seem that we needed to get a pedestrian connection through there. And again, we still have to go through a subdivision process once this is all said and done. This is just to allow them to move forward out from under the development agreement, or through the moratorium.
I'd like to thank the developer for bringing this to our community. This is great. Looking for you for years. I'm glad you showed up.
Other questions? Awesome.
Okay, awesome.
Thank you. I'm glad this is coming forward as well. This is exactly why we put those provisions in there, for these
Yeah.
to still come forward while we've got that moratorium.
I'll
in
give
place,
you-
so it's working just the way it should.
A heads up that next week we'll have two more, one of which is the DeBoover, one that we've been talking about. The other one is the Granite Highlands 8, which is under the other moratorium in the Woodburn Hills sub area, so more coming.
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks, Jimmy.
If I can just add to that, we have to get all of these done before the first of the year when low-impact development takes.
If they want to do those. Rob, good evening.
Good evening. Mayor,
CDBG
council.
application process. Shannon?
Yeah.
Good evening as well.
Good
We were joking about who's gonna muddle their way through the, pulling up the presentation.
PowerPoint, bottom left.
Oh, here. No,
And then hit it again.
hit this
Get out
again?
of it, yeah. I don't know how you get out of it.
Try Rose. This way?
Well, we're trying to find this, I wanted to point out to the council that we had a, a public hearing last month for, sidewalks in Addy. And, we thought we were proceeding with that project, and then we had some neighborhood, folks living on K Street that were very concerned about lack of sidewalks on K Street and the school kids walking to Gauze back and forth. So, we've sort of redirected, and we want to come to you with a different project for this year for CDBG. And it's going to be this K Street project that we're going to be talking about. And hopefully we've got some neighborhood advocates that will help us get through the survey process if we're funded through CDBG.
So is this replacing the Addie Street
This will be
one?
replacing the Addy Street.
Okay. So Addie didn't make it then, or,
So, for
New
you-
information.
New information. For years, we have been told by the program staff that you must have your public meetings done by your pre-app, which was held last week.
okay.
And so that's what we were tracking. I can't remember which council member I was talking to was asking about timing. And it was you, and I said it was too late because it was too late. When you know the day after the hearing, November 1st, I think it was Rebecca Shannon was communicating with the program staff, and they said, oh, you know what? Never mind on that pre-app deadline for your hearings. We've been doing that wrong all these years. You don't have to have your hearings until your application is due, and that's in early December. So we huddled up and said, oh, we have an opportunity here maybe to regroup and to reconsider, because no matter what we do with a project, we're gonna have to do a survey. And we've got some real neighborhood advocacy and some champions in that neighborhood whom you met at the previous hearing, and we thought that that would be a more appropriate project and have a greater chance of success of even completing the survey. We weren't even able to get the survey completed the last time we had to do a survey because people wouldn't participate, and we lacked a real neighborhood champion that could be standing at a door with someone and that would be recognized, and you could say, hey neighbor, would you please answer these questions because we're going to get a sidewalk maybe. Now I can tell you that there's about $475,000 available, and ourselves and our friends in the other cities are asking for 3 to 4 times that. So it's highly competitive this year. We've always done pretty well because the council steps up and makes a nice match, because we used some reserves several years ago and put them into a fund so that we could match these projects. So the Addy Street project's a great project. This is a great project. We think that this will be a project that will really get a good look because of the school.
Yes. Do you want to do questions now, or do you
It
want the
would-
presentation?
It was just a
Kinda
follow-up
get
to
us
his one statement, is you had mentioned the school sidewalk program before, that this could have been eligible for that.
Safe Routes to School is another program,
But-
but
This is more of a sure thing to,
It's a cycle, it's not, the next cycle is 2018.
and
for
better
Safe
end
Routes
up
to
with
School.
something as opposed to nothing too, possibly.
Or we just as soon try for all of them and hope to get
Well, I was just thinking I wouldn't wanna take away from, if we could put the money somewhere when this would be eligible for another type of money. I was just curious about that,
Yeah, well, there's no guarantee of getting either one though.
yeah.
right. And we have folks in the neighborhood, that's why we're really.
Yeah.
And that was exactly my question.
Okay, so, your presentation.
So there's not much more than that.
Oh, there is, you haven't got to my question yet.
Okay, good. So you can see from the map is displaying the sidewalks that are proposed on K Street as well as a portion on 32nd from K to J. As mentioned, this would connect up to Gauze Elementary, which would be beneficial. It's also, this sidewalks going down 32nd would connect to sidewalks that are already on 32nd just south of J. So you would have a connection there. This project is a little bit more expensive than the Addy Street project in that there's a utility component. The total project cost is $667,000. The grant match for CDBG, the maximum is either 54% or a total of $300,000. So we would be maxed out at the $300,000 cost. So Washugo's portion would be $367,000. However, $200,000 of that would be a utility, or come out of the utility funds. So $167,000 would be from the general fund. And as mentioned, we would still need to do the income survey, but we obviously have some community support in that arena, so that would also be a benefit to switching over to this project. As mentioned, we just submitted the pre-app, so we are able to fine tune things if we need to. The final application is due December 1st, so we can decide on this and move forward. And if that's the case, just as mentioned previously, CDBG requires that we have a public hearing with any project that's proposed. So we would request that a public hearing be set for November 21st as well.
How do you justify using $200,000 from the utility fund?
It's in that water line is in the water system plan as a replacement line. So it's a 2-inch line right now, and it needs to be upgraded to 8-inch, provide fire flow for that area.
So that would be a part of the project that would happen simultaneously as the sidewalks.
True. Way to go.
Really good. Other questions? I've got 2 items. One, are you absolutely married to where that proposed pedestrian crossing is on 32nd?
That's a carryover from J Street.
Yep.
So I put it in there because I thought it was important, but no, not totally connected. I do think we need to do something to get kids across the street there.
I would consider moving it farther south down to I Street, to that intersection.
Okay.
Only because of line of sight coming southbound on there. And if you're the young man in the little Honda that went through there at about 2 o'clock this afternoon, I think your water guys did the same thing and did a whip around. He must have been doing 60 going down 32nd. And when he hit that high point and could see that point, he'd already been on that. Not to say that moving it 100, 150 feet is gonna give any more, but it'll have some in there. And then my second item is, how devastating to any of this would it be to continue that sidewalk on 32nd up to L Street?
It wouldn't be devastating. You're just sending the people off to a shoulder again. So it's,
They're on the shoulder now.
yeah.
I see people struggle so badly along there. Anytime we've got somebody mobilized up there on 32nd in any area, I would love to see us try and make any kind of improvements in there we can. Even if it's not necessarily concrete, even if it's when the pavers come through that we prep it and get it ready and make it asphalt instead of something else, but something in there that gives them a safe haven.
If we make it part of the application, it just adds cost.
And that's why I wonder
If we do it as
We're already
a
maxed
trail,
out.
it's much less expensive than doing it as part of this project.
And I also don't wanna bump ours up enough to where it, consumes all of that or has any more chance of doing that, so.
I think there's 3, I saw the pre-app list came out just the other day. I think there's 3 projects that are asking for $300,000, and there's about $450 to give out. So what's gonna end up happening is, just assume, and then there's 2 other smaller ones. So for the sake of discussion, let's just assume that the number 1 ranked project is one of these $300,000 ones, and the number 2 ranked project is another of the $300,000 ones. The way the program works is the number 1 will get fully funded at the 300, and the second one will get 150, and they'll look at whomever that is on the spot and say, do you want the 150? And usually people go, yeah, we'll figure it out, But we could be that person. Hopefully we'll be the number 1. So the way it's looking, 1.5 of these projects are gonna get funded, and we hope that we're the one. I'm gonna remind everybody that we didn't have one last year and see if that helps the score.
Refresh my memory, didn't we just do a project on J Street?
We did apply for a project, but it
Oh,
fell
really?
into the income survey area,
Oh, okay.
and we didn't have luck getting those surveys completed.
Oh, okay,
So it's a very similar project to Block North.
okay. So it didn't go forward because of the income problem. Thank you.
Other questions?
That would be just the, oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's all right. This is unrelated to this, but it's sidewalks. The letter that we got as a council about 39th and Sunset from someone.
Yeah.
Is that, I'm not familiar with that area. Is that an area that's been looked at before for potential sidewalks?
It wasn't 39th and Sunset, it was Sunset.
He said
It
39th.
It mentioned
39th.
39th, but the piece of 39th he's talking about is the piece that's basically Orchard Hills and the people across the street. And so the problem is, whose front yard are you going to take? And there's also a significant elevation difference between the street and the land to both sides. So it's a very expensive sidewalk to build.
We're still not placing where it is.
You know
South
where
of,
Orchard
so
Hills is,
north?
39th.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, right along there. That's the only place there aren't any sidewalks.
Oh, on 39th. I just keyed into is going up or down 39th.
Yeah. And then Sunset, my memory is that we've got a Safe Routes to School trail that's going in that does a lot of that, does it not?
That we were looking at are you talking about east of Sunset View on Evergreen or?
No.
Sunset View into Jemtigard.
Yeah,
The back trail.
Yeah, that'll be in this, from Sunset Ridge
right.
east down into, south into Jemtigard.
Yeah, that's funded, correct? And
Yeah, we're hoping
Yes.
under
to build
construction.
this
Yeah,
next year.
yeah.
I just wanted to remind us all that this one, unfortunately, this one is a two-step. We might not even make it into the competition. First, we have to get enough participation in the survey. We're really hopeful that we can do that because of the neighborhood champions that we have. But then the data has to qualify, so the incomes in the area being served here have to meet the requirement. If both of those things happen, then we're competing. If one of those two things doesn't happen, we're not even competing. And that would have been true on Addie as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have a new item on the agenda that says unfinished business. I've not seen that one before. Do we have any?
We have no unfinished business. Well,
Awesome.
we have lots of things that we're working on, but nothing for today.
Okay. So we're at the second opportunity for anybody from the public that would like to address the council. Rob's already got her. I have nothing for you this evening. Any items from council members? Okay, we'll be adjourned from this meeting and back at 7 o'clock for council meeting. Thank you.